Hey there, and welcome to the further adventures of Market Store Buildings, where I'm starting to build the walkway to go in between the three market buildings that I've built. And here are all of my pieces. These are all offcuts, so you've got like bits like this kind of shape. These are all from the stairs from when I was first making the habitation blocks. That's this bit, which also forms this nice arrow. I did have to cut these bits, but everything is offcuts. Can't remember what all of them are from. They're from this and that and the other. So here we have the walkway area. One building will sit here, one building will sit here, one building will sit here, and that will give the raised area for the marketplace. Then this will be one of the steps. These two pieces will make a step up onto here. These two pieces will make a step up onto here. Now I've tried to keep it so that a 50mm base will be able to walk through the middle of the marketplace, so any tags or what have you should be able to fit through. The only thing you might struggle with is if you're using something like, I can't remember what it's called right now, big spider tank, scorpion tank thingy that is used by the Hakislam. But I'm not too worried about that because I don't possess any of these right now, so that's not a problem. You can just see that I have some tag ends sculling about from other sort of the small square pieces. So laying this up this way up, I will stick everything together underneath. So the material is 3mm deep. I'll then have it reinforced underneath and linked together by a mesh of combination of squares and longer pieces. I'll make a point of not coming up to the edges because I want there to be a slight overhang on the edges so that I can wedge the buildings in underneath, so that everything can be really nice and flush when it's all put down on the table. So first up, I'm going to just join everything together, and for structural reasons I'm mostly going to be using like little squares and such forth which have been left over from cutting out windows and just odds and sods and bits of ends and stuff. So again, using up every last scrap of material, which is why ideally don't throw anything away. There's always use for everything. So first up, I'll get everything stuck together roughly, and you can see what it looks like once it's made into a single piece. Just a quick couple of notes about assembling. So I'm using a steel rule combined with the grid on my cutting mat. So when I'm attaching these, so they were horizontally aligned, I'm using the horizontal alignment by putting them flush up to the metal straight edge. And then I'm using a fairly chunky bit here of staff pal-lite because I want a certain amount of rigidity so that when it's assembled I don't want it to have too much flex in it, because if it's got a lot of flex in it, and sadly paint will peel off quite easily. So with pieces like smaller pieces like this, or where there's a long flush edge to align everything along, it's quite easy to align. However, with these upright pieces, not only am I using the straight edge for measuring the gap, the distance, so the gap's pretty consistent, I'm trying to keep it 5mm. I'm also using the vertical lines on the grid in order to align them this way when I'm sticking them, and this is just as far as I'm concerned anyway, sort of the simplest way of keeping everything aligned whilst you're making this, because it's all fair and well laying it up and having it roughly right, but when it comes down to it you need to have the alignments pretty, well, not 100% accurate, but pretty close straight off the bat, because otherwise funny things will end up happening. So I'll crack on, I'll be back in a moment, I'll show you the sort of fully meshed out bottom mess. Here then is the bottom of the first piece, and as you can see it's kind of a mess in many respects, but I've just braced across, braced down, mostly because this is a bit flex. These have just been put in to act as resting pads so that when I flip it over it has something stable to rest on, and then it's also got that to rest on, so it's pretty stable. These gaps are actually pretty big. They are less than an inch, so you can cover them, but it might look a bit funny, so I've been thinking I might just run some mesh, which as ever I just happen to have sculling about, because, well, if you've been doing this for many years you probably have tons of stuff just sculling about as well. So then the last bit that I need to do on this, I just thought I'd show what I'm doing, is I've got to put the step up. So I have the step. Again, this is just another offcut. I've marked the center point. I've marked 5mm on. I've marked the center point. So that's just a 5mm overlap, center point to center point, glue in place, and that'll do that. So as well as this piece, I have also got this piece, which is a lot messier, as you can see. And again, it's just everything's joined up in a way which is pretty structurally sound. It's got a bit of flex, but it's I can pick it up by sort of any point. I think even if I pick it up here, it's pretty sound. Fortunately, again, the Powlite super glue bonds it very well. And once again, all of these bits are just to act as rests. Now, the reason this hasn't really got anything on it is because the bits that I'm using to form the step underneath will actually suffice to make the rest for that entire area, because they are fairly substantial. And once I've actually glued that into place, because I haven't quite decided exactly on the orientation yet, I will show you once I have though. If you notice, I'm lining up that corner and I'm lining up this corner so that when it's in place, those points will be flush and those will be flush, so that when you flip it over it kind of makes sense as a step. But I also want to make sure there's a decent amount of space on the step so you can at least stand a 25mm base on it, because I prefer it if everything can stand up on the steps without falling over and having to mess on. The other step over this side, even more offcuts, and they will, so as minimal overlap as possible. No, go on like that. And I've made it as two pieces, so again, I'll have a bit of option with how I use the train, and I'll be able to arrange it slightly differently each time. So I'm going to get these steps all attached, and I'll get back to you once they're attached. Catch you in a moment. Here we have a basic walkway then. It's all set up, all the steps are in place, and if I just quickly flip over the top piece, you can see how everything's aligned at the bottom. So these two edges are aligned flush. This edge is overlapping ever so slightly and not going over this corner. Then on the other side, these also the two pieces here, and same on the other side, I've actually glued them together along the long edge before sticking them on, and I've kept them flush on the table when I've joined them together, just so that they're flush and they're flat and there's no lift or anything. A line to the corner, a line to the corner, so if I flip it over it comes right up to the corner and it comes out of the corner. And this just keeps everything looking, for want of a better word, kind of realistic, because this tends to be how things get lined up by sort of building jobs or what have you, where everything's kept flush. So next up I am going to be using mesh. So here it is, mesh off the roll. Now you get this from modelling shops or art stores, what have you. I can't remember the brand of this because I've had it going around for ages and branding seems to change with time. But this is actually for sculpting, and I'm trying to think what its purpose was. It was like papier-mâché / plaster kind of under material, so that you'd have the mesh and you lay and you sculpt stuff out of the mesh. So this has got quite a lot of flex and give, but I just want to use it literally as a mesh. But because it's got so much flex in it, it's kind of ideal for our purposes. Also, you can cut it with scissors, and that's the other reason it's ideal for our purposes. So I'm going to cut out a couple of pieces of this and get them to match up to the pieces that I've got. And I shall get back to you in a second, just before I fit all of that. So here then I've got my first bit of mesh cut, and in order to fit it, you can see I've roughly shaped it to the piece that I'm trying to cover. In order to fit it, you'll see it's got flex in it. So first of all, I want to roll it backwards around the tube that it came off of. If you are not far enough through the mesh, because you've just bought a brand new roll and you don't want to sort of unroll the whole thing and straighten it, then if you've got another cardboard tube or an old loo roll, or even better, old kitchen roll, kitchen towel roll, just something you can wrap it around so that you can remove that. Normally if you've got flex and something like this, you roll it back on itself. I don't want to bend it too far, which is why you want a cardboard tube to bend it around. But when you roll it back on itself, you remove that sort of that flex that way and put the flex back the other way, which just helps to flatten it out, which makes your life a bit easier. Having done that, before folding around the edges, you need to stick it in place to hold it as flush to the material as you possibly can. In this case, I'll also push it down so it comes down around the step edges and glue it down onto that lower step. This will give me my mesh over the top of the whole thing. You may decide that in your preferences that you want to do something like this as a secondary thing. So depending on how good looking you want your stuff to be, depends on sort of how long a process you want to run. But you could, for instance, paint this and then mesh over the top so the mesh stays mesh coloured. But in that case, you need to leave the underside unpainted so that you can glue the mesh to something. The other thing is, I mean, I'm not going to use edgings in this case, but if you can get the correct edgings, you can shell out on various model companies, do like girders, but you don't want H-shaped girder sort of pieces, but they do them in, sort of in plastic. But if you could find 4mm, you need, basically, because the 3mm depth of material, right, I'd want like a 4 or 5mm gap. So maybe if we could find 5mm girder pieces or U-shaped pieces, you could then run cladding around the edge, which would help to pinch it in place and be another surface gluing it into place, but also would act as a neat way of finishing it off. But like I said, I'm not too worried about that. I will fold it underneath the material. So I'm going to get this glued in place and I will fold it underneath so I can show you what I mean by how to just get everything neat around the edges. Here's the mesh cut to fit then, and you notice that I've cut slashes into the mesh coming up into every tip of a corner and every inset corner, and it's just so that you can fold the mesh around. So if I now flip this over, we find ourselves in this situation where I'm going to have to once again just cut everything neat so that I can fold it flush without running over any of these rises. Also, with the bit for the step, I've used a heavy square edge. In my case, I've just got a big whetstone that I use, which is basically like a brick, to push it in. Also, just to get it as flush as possible, been using an allspike just to use the sort of the flat edge of the allspike and keep pushing that in. And this, again, it'll need trimming because I'll run it so it's flush with the bottom edge of the step, because I don't want anything folding in underneath onto this plane, because that will cause unnecessary elevation and also potentially scratch stuff that it's sitting on, which I don't particularly want. So I will cut this, fold it, neaten it up, and I will show you how that's going in a moment. But also, we've got the other one where, because I decided I'm going to leave the step uncovered on these, I just left an edge so I can fold it down. But apart from that, similar process. It's cut quite flush, slashes into corners, everything folded up and over. And I will remove material as and how I see fit in order to make it fit flush to the bottom. So again, I will get all this done and I shall be back in a mo with both of these folded and ready to go. Here we have it, and all the edges have been folded in, and especially on this, mostly it's been cut away, and then I've lathered it in super glue, especially around here because I want this to be as sort of not scrapey as possible. So I've actually put quite a lot of glue on there to, there's still the odds, but it's not really sharp. I've tried to keep this as flush as possible to the bottom edge, so there's as little fold over as possible, because I don't actually want it to be folding over. And then again, around all these edges where I folded it in, I've just lathered it in super glue to hold it in place. So when I flip it, we have this, and I think that looks pretty canny, or pretty good, sorry. It's Newcastle, isn't. Not from Newcastle myself, but you know, you can tend to pick up words to where you live. So there you go, that's piece number one. Here's piece number 2. I'm also going to point out that as I was folding stuff in, I actually was trimming away areas and making it so that none of it went over the top of this. It's much easier if it just lies flush with the surface. And on this one, I've also had to trim pieces away like around here. So this is virtually just lying flat and lying flush because there's not much of an indent left by this, but then this gives this some decent structural integrity. But I've also let it fold in much further here so that I've got more area to glue on. And also on this one, if I flip it over, you can see I haven't run the mesh over the entirety of the model, so that this first step is just a flat material, but I have, as much as possible, there is some bits where it just doesn't quite, but as much as possible run the mesh over the edge of the first step, so that this is where I've been applying glue to hold it in place. Same on this side, but again you can see here it's due to a slight miscalculation of scale. Well, basically a botched up, but meh, it's fine. And but that ended up with that being not mesh right down onto the edge of the step, just there. But again, I'm not really fussed about it. So yeah, I mean the other thing is, because I've got this in 2 pieces, is you can put it together in different ways. But first up, I'll just show you what it looks like put together in the sort of intended fashion. Here we are then, looking down into the market. And if we just zoom in, you can see, scrolling through, you've got quite a lot of detail in there, a lot of cover still, a lot of places to move around. And this is what it looks like if you combine everything together. It gives us a gateway into the world. Here's a profile view then, and just so you can sort of see how everything fits together really. I think it worked quite well. If I just grab a mini for scale. This is an URI pilot, so that's a standard old school Infinity miniature, I suppose N2 and before, so true scale 25mm. And if I also just grab in a more recent one, that is 28mm current scale N3 miniature. And also just so you can see that at the narrowest point, which is here, your tag will still fit on its base in the gap. Finally then, just here's an example of how you could have it just as one piece by itself. You don't necessarily have to use it all. Or alternatively, you could have it set up something like this where you have the other piece functioning with other buildings. And at the moment I'm just using the market store buildings. When everything's painted and done and I've finished all the painting videos and what have you, I'll do some kind of showcase where I actually show the whole market store with the kawaii kiosks and the bus shelters and the actual pavement bits, so you can kind of see how everything interacts to build up something more than just itself. Also do some different configurations using some of the poster sets that I've built. We have then the final product, the 2-piece walkway system. And a final note, if anybody plays like Space Hulk or wants to play equivalent kind of Space Hulky type things, if you don't want to make kind of full walled kind of 3D maps or what have you, although that might be something I end up doing in the not too distant future, we shall see. This is actually kind of a great way of making those kind of maps, because you get the walkway pieces, you build up different sections of walkway, different room pieces, and then rather than building all the walls and everything, you just lay them down as a flat map, and that gives you your sort of meshed walkways and what have you. Also, if you did want to build it for the actual game proper, you can always stick stuff over the top, cladding over the top, and sandwich the mesh in between sheets of stuff, so that you then end up with the squares, so you get the grid system as well if you so desire. So I hope it's been some interest and use to you, and that you're making all the detailed bits and pieces that make a difference between your board looking how you want it to look and not how you want it to look. Thank you for watching, take care and have a good one. Bye bye.